Up next, we have our blueprint update. Invite Ms. Marcy Groover.
Hey, good evening, President Post, Dr. Newsom, and members of the board. I'm Marcy Groover, our CCPS Blueprint and Communications Coordinator. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with our blueprint update and progress tonight. On October 21st, our team met with the AIB and MSDE for our Progress Monitoring Conference in Annapolis. It was a great opportunity to highlight the progress CCPS is making, discuss specific challenges, and share our next steps. Throughout the session, the panel asked thoughtful questions, and we were able to provide them with some important context for Calvert so that they could see the unique characteristics that we have in our county, as well as a lot of our strengths. A link to our detailed progress report is included on this slide. You also have a hard copy for your reference because this provides a lot more detail than I'll be able to give you tonight in our presentation. Our self-assessment found that CCPS is meeting expected progress to blueprint outcomes in all 5 pillars. We've just received a draft meeting summary from the AIB, and we will receive a separate document outlining areas of strength and growth in the next few weeks. Next, we'll look at each of the blueprint's 5 pillars, starting with Pillar 1, Early Childhood. CCPS has made major strides in expanding our early learning access, including a significant expansion of pre-K slots. It's important to note that every Tier 1 eligible family who applied for pre-K received a spot in CCPS. We are working through the challenge of continued pre-K expansion given limited physical space. Our team will continue to collaborate with and reach out to families, community partners, and private providers to grow our early childhood programming in creative and maintainable ways. Under Pillar 2, CCPS is developing a sustainable educator pipeline through the new career ladder, certification supports, and leadership development. We're proud to report a 350% increase in national board certified teachers and an enhanced teacher induction and mentoring program that supports every new teacher joining our Calvert team. We continue to navigate recruitment challenges in a very competitive labor market. However, our team is strategic and data-driven. As part of the blueprint requirements, we established a career ladder, and I'd like to take a minute to provide you with additional information to note our progress in this important area. We received feedback on our July 1st career ladder submission, and we met all technical requirements. Only minor revisions were requested, which were completed and resubmitted for AIB approval at their November board meeting. The career ladder establishes a 60-40 workday for participating teachers, 60% of the time for direct instruction, and 40% collaboration, which may include data analysis, small group instruction, and professional learning as some examples. Level 4 positions will introduce an additional instructional leader in our schools, helping strengthen and sustain effective instructional teaming. We do have evidence of strong practices that currently exist in many of our schools, and this career ladder structure is designed to make those more consistent and deeply embedded systematically. While this brings instructional benefits, it also introduces fiscal considerations, and we're planning for those carefully as we move forward. Moving to Pillar 3, Calvert continues to make steady gains in literacy, math, and college and career pathways. We regularly analyze our data to make informed instructional adjustments that keep student learning moving forward. At the same time, implementation is impacted by overlapping state policy changes in math and literacy, as well as possible resource limitations, which could include funding, staffing, and coaching. To strengthen our academic monitoring, we're preparing to launch the Panorama Student Success Data Platform to streamline how we track student academic progress and supports. CCPS is meeting its goals for providing comprehensive student supports by expanding targeted programs, integrating support systems, and aggressively addressing chronic absenteeism. Like other districts, we are always looking for more time to do everything that we need to do. Our teams are working on deepening coordination of of support services across departments and strengthening our multi-tiered system of supports framework. The AIB requested specific data related to chronic absenteeism prior to our conference. This is a priority area for the state. As you can see from this table, CCPS has successfully reversed a severe spike in chronic absenteeism. After rising from 9.4% in 2021 to a high of 30.3% across all levels in 2022, the all-student rate has steadily declined to just 17.3% in 2025. This is a remarkable turnaround that reflects the dedication of our schools and families. Next, CCPS is meeting expectations for governance and accountability, though we do face challenges related to the complexity of Blueprint fiscal requirements. We have successfully submitted our Blueprint implementation plan and have established internal structures for progress monitoring. As you can see in this photo of the Northern Middle School replacement project, and thank you, Dr. Newsom, he gets the photo credit for this slide, our Blueprint work connects directly to investments that strengthen learning environments for students. The primary difficulty is the complexity of financial tracking, which currently involves extensive manual reconciliation by a small finance team. Moving forward, the team aims to streamline cost allocation processes and strengthen cross-departmental collaboration regarding financial matters. Finally, a quick update on minimum school funding, or MSF. This is a major accountability component of the Blueprint. MSF requires that 75% of our per pupil funding be allocated directly to schools across 8 programs and 100% for concentration of poverty and private pre-K grants. The Blueprint's intent was to ensure equitable funding for students. And I want to point out that this is about how we are documenting the funding for students and the dollars, how the dollars are reaching students at each school. It is not new funding. FY25 was a baseline year. In FY26, we must reduce the gap of schools not in compliance by at least 50%. In FY27, we must demonstrate that 100% of students attend a school that meets the applicable requirements. There is a waiver process for LEAs to engage in if they anticipate not meeting MSF requirements. But to be clear, we have budgeted proactively to meet the FY26 targets. But there are several factors that could impact our compliance, and this is true for every LEA in the state. These concerns have been shared with the AIB. The AIB will be discussing the waiver process, including potential deadline changes, and will have more information once additional guidance is provided. In summary, CCPS continues to make strong, steady progress across all 5 Blueprint pillars. We're proud of the collaboration happening across departments, schools, and community partners as we work to meet the goals of the Blueprint for Maryland's future. So thank you all for your continued support, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. So at the beginning, page 3 for early childhood, it says that we have capacity for 392 students, but only seated 318. Is there a reason we didn't fill the other 74 seats?
There is. Do you want to take it?
So when we look at how many seats are available and which students or families have the opportunity, we were specifically looking at Tier 1 families. Our expansion this year was really about including Head Start classrooms, where we've had students in those classrooms for the last several years. They are now considered Calvert County Public Schools students. So we did not reach the target that we wanted to reach, but there's always this unknown because it is about how many students their families would qualify for being up to 300% of the poverty level. So in some cases, it's a estimate of what we think we would be able to have or how many students would be coming in who meet that requirement. The other piece that came into play is the sliding scale. So MSDE added the sliding scale, but it wasn't fully implemented for this year. It was only partially implemented. And it was partially implemented for students whose families met up to 360% of the poverty level, where they would Part of tuition would come from the per pupil allocation that we receive from MSDE, and part would come from the families. Since this was the first time we were implementing a sliding scale in payment for pre-K, we stopped at the 360% of the poverty level. So we do have students who are Tier 1, and any Tier 1 family who has applied has received a spot. And then we move to that Tier 2 portion, going up to 360% of the poverty level. And in some cases, the families declined, and in others, they chose to include their students.
So is the state mandating that we charge families for pre-K if we have spots?
That is a decision of the local school system. That was a decision that we made last year, moving into this year, because we will receive no per pupil allocation.
So when
Funding.
when we have capacity for 392, does that mean we hired staff to support classrooms for 392 kids?
So the maximum number of students that we would put into a classroom is 20. Have we reached that maximum at every classroom? No. We have reached it in many classrooms across the district and many schools, and in some cases, like at St. Leonard, that was our first pre-K classroom that reached capacity. And then we still had more families that would have been at St. Leonard, so we were transporting them to Mutual. So we also have that piece of trying to ensure we, one, have space for all Tier 1 families, two, that we're able to transport those Tier 1 students who meet the Tier 1 requirement.
Okay, so did we have to, because we didn't fill all the seats, did we have to get rid of any people that we said, like made offers to or said we were going to hire for these roles? Or are they all being utilized in some way?
They are all being utilized. They
Okay.
all have students in the classrooms.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
For Pillar 4, when I was looking at that chronic absenteeism, at the elementary and middle school level, we saw a reduction. But at the high school level, 21.9 to 21.7 really doesn't look like a statistically significant. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. What is the plan for high school? Is there anything in place that we're doing to try to improve that?
There absolutely is, and the Student Services Department does use a 5-tier intervention system, and so they are disaggregating the data by the student groups, and they review it monthly, as do the schools. So they have identified which students need supports, and there are specific interventions and supports in place. It does look different at the high school level than elementary. So high school is being addressed, but we also recognize that if we can get students to have those better habits earlier on, those tend to stick, and then that will hopefully reduce the percentage that we're seeing at the high school level as the students advance in grade levels. Ms. Lewis in Student Services actually has the most knowledge about this area, so I'm happy to get more information to you about that.
Okay, and on Pillar 3, you were talking about overlapping MSDE policy changes. Does overlapping mean that they're contradicting each other or something else?
They're not contradicting, they're just happening at the same time. So the things that have to be put in place for the literacy policy is happening at the same time that the math policy is starting to implement their timeline. And so it's a lot of things that our school system and our educators are juggling as they're trying to ensure that we're in compliance with these policies.
Okay, now I know next year we're supposed to go to, I think it's 300 minute, or it can't be, is it 300 minutes of?
For middle school math, yes.
Right. Where are they going to take that time from? Do we have a plan for that?
I do know the math leadership team has been looking at this, and they are in the process of determining that structure and what the schedule could look like. I don't have the specifics for you, but I'm happy to get back to you on that.
Okay. One last one with Tier 1. We talked about continuing outreach programs with private providers. How many private providers do we have?
We currently have one who is partnering with us in the official capacity for the pre-K expansion grant. However, there are a lot of good collaborative structures in place where we are partnering with them through ECAC, and many of them are joining us with our professional learning sessions. So there's a lot more opportunities than just what is officially on paper through the grant application process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
I had one thing. I just wanted to follow up back from Ms. Goshrin's question with you, Ms. Jacobs. So I understand the state's not mandating we charge the families for pre-K outside of the tier, and you'd mentioned we made a decision last year. So are we as Calvert County charging our families for pre-K if they're outside of that range?
Yes.
Okay.
So any family that is between 301 and 360% of the poverty level, they are paying part of that sliding scale. Anyone else would have to pay the full per pupil amount because CCPS would not receive any funding for those students.
And what's the amounts, or what are the amounts, and who determines them? Is it the state, or is it the LEA?
It is the state.
Okay.
The state determines that. So the per pupil amount for FY26 is $14,473. And then the sliding scale, it is a portion of that. And I would have to find that exact number, but I can get that for you.
Okay, and have we, maybe this is a better question for Scott, or maybe you as well, have we done any analysis on what that net cost would be if we filled all the seats and didn't charge? Or do we have any idea how many more people might do it if we didn't charge versus paying $14,000 for pre-K?
So I think right now we are serving approximately 25% of a typical grade level. So if we didn't charge and we had the capacity to add all the classrooms, we would be looking at adding like a kindergarten grade level as pre-K, if that's what you're asking. So we would have to add 3 to 4 additional classrooms per building if it was open to all families, because pre-K is not required by the state of Maryland for students to attend, but we do have to, through the blueprint, have space available for those families that meet the Tier 1 eligibility requirement.
And when they meet the tier 1, the state then gives us money for those, but it's anyone that doesn't meet the tier 1 requirements, then we don't get the funding, and if we choose to seat them, we have to cover the cost.
Yes.
Okay. And is the state telling us how many seats we need to have?
No, and that's why sometimes we're estimating about how many students we would have each year. And again, just like with any other grade level, the amount of students in that grade level is going to ebb and flow. So one year we're going to have 4 kindergarten classrooms in a school, and the next year we might have 5, and then the following year we might have 3, depending on how many students, meet that age requirement. And so that's something we're trying to work through, because it's not only how many students we would have, but how many of those students would meet the income eligibility, which is really hard to estimate. So we're trying to work through that. But what we have done is we have ensured we have at least 1 pre-K classroom in every elementary school so that the students can attend in their home zoned area and not have to travel from one school to the other. We've added additional classrooms, like at Patuxent Appeal Campus, we have 2, because we know we have more students in the South who meet that income eligibility requirement. So we want to ensure that we have an additional classroom there. And then where we place our Head Start classrooms. So that gives us some flexibility of where they're placed, but we do know in our southern schools, we might have more students, so we want to add more classrooms there. But every school has 1, and we thought that was very important so that students weren't traveling far distances to get to their schools and were able to go to the school that they would articulate to in the next grade level.
If my memory serves me correct, wasn't there an issue meeting that 75%, 100% criteria because we had some type of a grant?
So it is possible that because we were able to get grant funding, which of course we want, the grant funding, that it may impact our ability to meet it with local funds for that 75% requirement in certain programs. Our finance team is currently checking all of our numbers to see where we are so that we can determine what the next steps are. And of course, we're waiting for AIB to also tell us if there's going to be any changes to that waiver process.
How long is that grant for? Because it can't be much longer, I would think.
It's this year, right?
The pre-K expansion grant is,
It's just one.
yeah. And then, Mr. Marcio, to answer your question, so for FY '26, the full tuition is $14,473. Those meeting that up to 360% of the poverty level, from 301 to 360, they are paying $1,447.30.
So can I ask you, so to follow up on that, it's about $78 a day for school for little kids. I wonder, is that an impact on the private daycare in the county?
So as far as the students not attending the private daycare and coming to Calvert County Public Schools?
Right, so we went through COVID. A lot of the daycares closed up because they couldn't possibly do all the cleaning and everything else that was the protocol for the state. I just wonder if we're harming our private providers by promoting this.
So I would say one of the things in Calvert County is that we do not have a whole lot of private providers, that there is a waiting list in most private provider settings. And so this expands that opportunity, especially for our low-income families who may not be able to afford private providers. When I think about what I paid for my own son for pre-K a week versus having this opportunity for a family that might not be able to afford that, they now have that opportunity. So I think it expands the opportunity. The other piece of the blueprint that's really important is that collaboration with private providers. And we have been working really closely with them to have them apply for the grant. We would love to see them apply for the grant and receive it for a 3-year-old program, because that's the next step. We are out of space in a lot of our schools. We don't have another classroom to add another 3 or 4-year-old program. And so what we're really hoping is, in collaboration with them, they would write for the grant and receive it. To date, we have had multiple private providers apply for the grant but have not received it. And so we are working with them and MSDE to see if we can get them to write for the 3-year-old program. The problem is also, do they have the space? Because they already have 3-year-olds in their buildings, and do those 3-year-olds meet the income eligibility? And if they don't, then this would not be a place for that program. They would have to add a classroom, or would they possibly add more students to a classroom? So those are things that they have to work through. Do they have the space to add additional students through this program or not?
Okay, that's a lot to consider. I was going to ask, the Pillar 2 gives me the most pause for the 60-40 requirement. What do you think that our utilization is now between teaching and collaboration? What do you estimate that to be?
That's a great question, because we do have some buildings that have instances of that happening. So we can look at where we do have that structure in place, but the blueprint also has postponed the implementation of that phase-in plan. So before we had an 8-year phase-in process, that has been delayed until next year. So now we'll have a 7-year phase-in process. But the idea is that in order to do this, we are looking at giving teachers more time during that workday for that 40% time, which we would have to then figure out how to cover the classes that they're not teaching.
Yeah, I don't know how we would come up with the money for that.
Well,
right?
yeah, that, and keep class sizes
Right, manageable.
yeah, it's going to be a
It
really
would be
big challenge.
great to give everybody 40% collaboration time, but if you lose half of your colleagues to layoff, that's not fun either, right?
Ms. Goshorn?
Yeah, I have two more comments around the chronic absenteeism. So it's great that we're getting kids to come to school. We do hear a lot of concerns of parents when they get these letters that their kids are missing a lot of school because they're keeping them home because they're sick and they don't want to send them to school so they don't spread illnesses. But then they're really sick in the year and then they get these letters saying, we're going to hold your kid back if they miss any more days of school. I think we just need to be more aware of that. We don't want sick kids to come to school because we don't want to spread disease or illness. So I just have to, we get a lot of emails about that, so I just have to say we need to be really aware of what we're putting out to parents. Second to that, as you talked about strategies for getting kids to come to school. When I was in school a million years ago, one of the most exciting things at the end of every year was to get the Perfect Attendance Award. Maybe we should consider giving Perfect Attendance Awards again every year. I know we do them, but we don't do them every year. And some kids really love that. And so something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.